Aikido is a Japanese martial art with its roots in Jiu-Jitsu and Japanese sword arts. It was developed by Ueshiba Sensei, otherwise known as O Sensei, which means the great teacher. And a lot of people describe it as an evolved form of Jiu-Jitsu. Other people describe it as moving Zen. Anyway, Aikido focuses on timing and positioning rather than physical strength and size. Well, the biggest difference between Aikido and other martial arts, I suppose, would be the fact that we don't work on the perfection of strikes in Aikido. We don't learn how to kick and how to punch. Instead, we focus on the other side of the conflict, what to do when the punch or the kick is coming at us. The movements are circular rather than going against the natural order of the universe. They go with it. Aikido techniques find their resolution in either a joint lock to subdue the attacker or a throw, not a break of the bones. Kenkyukai translates literally to research group. So the name of our group is Aikido Research Group. Takeda Sensei chose the name Aikido Kenkyukai, I believe, to constantly remind us that we're just researchers. Our research is never finished. Aikido is too vast to ever think that we've got it now. Specific, everybody who wants to be stretched mentally, physically, spiritually. The youngest student I've ever had was 3 years old. The oldest student I've ever had was 76. And the reason the 76-year-old quit was because she had to go to Africa for work, she said. So yeah, everybody can do it. One thing that comes to mind, somebody called me one time saying that he liked Aikido because you didn't have to be strong to do it. It focuses on the positioning and the timing. And because of that, he wanted to sign up his daughter. But he planned to sign his son up for boxing. And I thought that was really kind of funny because even if you're a man and you're strong, you don't know that you're going to be the biggest and the strongest in any conflict situation. So, and then even if you are the biggest and strongest, sooner or later everybody gets old. And then you lose at least a little bit of physical strength and stamina. As far as different experiences I've had with training with all types of people, I know one person in Japan who is in a Aikido for handicapped people class. He's in a wheelchair. And maybe the most impressive experience I've ever had since starting Aikido was when an Aikido teacher with polio took part in one of our gashkus. A gashku is a weekend intensive. And I should add that this particular gashku was one of the most intensive I've ever participated in. We had one 6th Dan teacher from Japan teaching, and some other very high-ranked teachers from Japan training as well. Anyway, not knowing that this particular person had polio, I was really surprised when he showed up using crutches to walk. And he brought his student along with him too, who was also very good, by the way. The first day of training, which was 2 two-hour classes, he trained with everyone using a crutch. When he got on the mat, I thought he was just going to disengage when Nage, or the person throwing, got to the point of actually throwing him, but he didn't. He took every fall, took every throw. He did everything that everyone else did. And it took him a long time to get up after each fall. He had to use his crutch and then his free arm to prop himself up. It took a long time and looked very exhausting. And the next day I found him sitting in the corner of the dojo dressed in his street clothes, and he apologized to me, saying that he wasn't going to train that day because the braces in his legs had left gashes in his skin from the constant rubbing the day before. I looked and he had these big gashes in his ankles. And that gashku was the only gashku where none of my students or myself were able to complain about stiff, achy muscles or any other physical discomfort that we were experiencing. Everyone was very humbled by this. Well, the reason that I started Aikido, it brings me to kind of a funny story. I don't know why, but I was always interested in martial arts from the time I was a kid. And I wanted to do karate at the YMCA when I was about 8 or 10, but my parents weren't really behind me on that. They didn't want me to do that. So I took piano lessons and I took horseback riding lessons. And I got into competitive horseback riding. And after about 10 years of competitive horseback riding, I sold my horse. And a few months after that, I started to miss the workout. I wanted some sort of physical activity again. So I went and I looked at a few dojos, a judo dojo, a kung fu dojo, and I watched the classes. But I was a little bit disappointed. The teacher didn't really match my image of what a martial arts teacher should be. They were more like the high school football coach, I felt. And then I saw a flyer advertising Aikido, and it seemed to be exactly the sort of thing that I was interested in from the description. So I went and watched, and what I liked in the description was the idea that you could have some physical activity, but also some spiritual principles that you can hopefully use in your day-to-day life. So I went to watch the class, and I was really impressed with how the teacher wasn't talking just about techniques. He wasn't like barking commands at them like a drill sergeant. But the problem when I went there was that the students weren't doing kicks or punches. So I thought, well, this must be a really wimpy, weak martial art. And that was the big disadvantage for me at the time watching it. But I had a 1-month Christmas vacation starting the next day. So I thought, okay, well, this isn't really a good martial art. It's not really a strong martial art, but I'll do it for 1 month, and then I'll go find a real martial art. And that was about 20 years ago. Describe my experience doing Aikido. That's pretty difficult, but I can say that I love it and I hate it. It never fails to show me my own strong points as well as my shortcomings. If I listen carefully, sometimes it shows me new perspectives on old and current problems in my life. And every now and then, it provides me with a breakthrough. And because I love it and hate it, I continue. Takeda Yoshinobu Sensei is my teacher, and he has been since 1987 when I moved to Japan. His Aikido is very dynamic, and it's always evolving. He's also one of the few teachers I've known who really allows people to be themselves in Aikido. In other words, he doesn't try to fit everyone into one mold. He realizes that each human has a different body, a different personality, and so on. So each person's Aikido will be a little bit different. As far as his background is concerned, Takeda Sensei is generally thought to be the top student of the late Grandmaster Yamaguchi Seigo Sensei, who was head instructor at the World Headquarter Dojo in Tokyo for many years. Takeda Sensei has his headquarter dojo in Yokohama, with many satellite dojos in the Yokohama-Tokyo area, as well as the USA, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. If I have to choose one thing that I consider the most valuable teaching that I received from Takeda Sensei, I think it would be how he teaches. Of course, his Aikido is fantastic and just amazing to me. But the way he teaches is also phenomenal, and it's very Aiki in spirit. When someone's turning in the wrong direction for the technique, for example, he never says, no, not that way, turn this way. Instead, he always says things like, exactly, great, now try the same thing, only turn in the opposite direction. Or if you're all hunched over with lousy posture, he doesn't tell you, your posture's lousy. He tells you to straighten your back even more. So it's very positive and encouraging, and it creates a wonderful learning environment for people. As I said earlier, Yamaguchi Seigo Sensei was head teacher, head instructor at the World Headquarter Dojo in Tokyo for many years, and Takeda Sensei's teacher, Takeda Sensei being my teacher. Before becoming head instructor in '61, he was uchideshi, or live-in disciple, for O Sensei, the founder of Aikido, from 1950. He was very well known in Europe, perhaps more than here. He traveled to France every year for many years. His Aikido was very different from all the other teachers at the time. It was very powerful, very sharp, and of course very confusing. You never knew what had hit you when you got thrown by him. You didn't know how you had been sent sailing. Well, I lived in Japan for 9 years, and how I got there that's a little bit long story, but pretty funny. I had wanted to go from the time I started my Aikido training in '82. I liked traveling, and I thought it would be a really interesting country to visit, in addition to being a valuable training experience. So I tried mailing applications to a few English schools in Japan, but I didn't have any luck. In '85, I started teaching English as a second language, part-time in Boston, and that's where I started training at Bill Gleason Sensei's dojo. Through that work, teaching English as a second language, I met 2 Japanese who invited me to stay with them if I ever came to Japan. And one even offered me a job in Kyoto. The problem was that I didn't have enough money to get there, since I could only get a few hours a week teaching English, and I supplemented that with waitressing, but only did that at times when it didn't conflict with the training schedule. So that left me mostly lunch shifts, and the tips aren't as good for lunches. Then I had a really lucky day, and I was riding my bicycle to the English school when a truck hit me. And the truck belonged to a big construction company, and the driver was completely in the wrong. There were witnesses, and the police came. And I wanted them just to replace my bent bicycle, but they refused. So a lawyer got $1,000 for me. At about the same time that I got the $1,000, Gleason Sensei invited Takeda Sensei to Boston for one of our gashgus, or one of our weekend intensives. He came, and I was so impressed with his Aikido. I was still very inexperienced at the time, but I remember him throwing me in, at one time in particular. I still clearly remember what technique it was. And I ended up lying on the mat, looking up at him, and I had absolutely no recollection of any feeling whatsoever. I knew I had grabbed his wrist, and I had a picture in my memory of my fingers wrapping around his wrist, but I couldn't remember any physical sensation. If it felt stiff or loose or whatever, I couldn't remember anything. About 6 months later, in '87, a couple of senpai, people who were senior to me, left to train with Takeda Sensei, and they said I could stay at their place temporarily. That was about the time that I got the $1,000, so off I went to Japan with my $1,000. And that was when their economy was really strong, so I was really in for a surprise when I changed my dollars into yen. It really didn't leave me with very much. But I found work after about 1 or 2 weeks, and so things turned out okay. It was really pretty easy to find work at that time in Japan. Well, yeah, training in Japan is very different. And of course, that's not to say that it's better or worse. The biggest difference that comes to mind first is the idea of senpai kohai, or senior and junior. Japanese culture teaches to respect those senior to you, your elders, upperclassmen in school, one who started a hobby or art before you. Often sensei's teaching is so advanced that the beginners can't understand at all. And senpai, whose skill isn't as developed, serves as a link in grasping sensei's teachings. And this leads me to another difference, which is that many Westerners choose a dojo or seminar to join simply by who will be teaching at that dojo or at that seminar. And we forget to take into account things like who our training partners will be and how many chances we'll get to actually have contact with the instructor and things like that. In Japan, there's more value placed on choosing a good training partner than here. When a technique has been demonstrated and the students are told to please practice, it's not at all uncommon in Japan for 2 or 3 people to rush, actually run, to a senior student to get the opportunity to train with him. And the senior students really serve as a link to the teacher's technique, so everyone fights over chances to train with them. Another difference is that there's not nearly as much verbal explanation and analyzing during class in Japan. Training time is a chance to watch, and really, really watch, very carefully, and feel what's happening in the movement. It's a time to get in touch with your intuitive self and take a break from the intellectual, analytical self that so many of us have to use in our jobs each day. This brings me to another difference. Since there's no talking during these class times, students often socialize after training. And it's during these get-togethers that sensei, the teacher, or senpai, the senior students, will often drop some valuable hints and advice for kohai, the junior students, to work on in their training, as well as new insights into any matters in their everyday lives. And this practice of socializing after training not only helps kohai in his study of Aikido, but it also bonds the dojo. And one benefit of this bonding practice is that the training can more easily be very realistic. In other words, since everyone has a strong relationship, it's easier to not take it personally. If you're having trouble executing certain techniques with a certain partner, you don't think, oh, he's trying to give me a hard time. He's just being honest, and he's giving you the best training that he can give you. In the US, people often go straight home after each training, and they lose this chance to bond, as well as get valuable advice or new insights. Also, I've been in situations where a sensei's been virtually ignored at gatherings, and I thought what a waste it was. I always enjoyed talking to various senpai, and especially teachers, Takeda Sensei, Gleason Sensei, Yamaguchi Sensei. I enjoyed talking to them about Aikido, of course, but I also enjoyed talking to them about all aspects of life. And so often, they have a completely different take on things, a very Aiki outlook. It's completely different from the take that you would get from other people, from talking to other people. Also, Japanese are generally more comfortable with the idea of not asking questions or understanding things right off the bat. And they're more comfortable with just copying and doing, asking questions later. They seem to feel that, well, if this person is this good and he's doing this or that, then I guess I'll try doing this or that too. And we Westerners usually have a lower tolerance for this type of thinking. Most of us are willing to have this attitude for a few weeks or a few months, but it's hard for us to say to ourselves, okay, he's really good at this and he's doing that, so I'll try that for 10 years and maybe I'll get good too. We want to understand things intellectually and thereby have a guarantee that it'll pay off someday. Like, you know, if I save this much money every month, I'll be able to buy a house in 5 years. If I stick to my workout and diet regimen, I'll lose 15 pounds by summer or whatever. But we can't say that if you meditate every day, you will certainly reach enlightenment. Or if you train Aikido every day, that you'll grasp the true meaning of the art and become a master in 25 years. We can't give that guarantee. There are a lot of other differences. Promptness of class starting times, honor, senpai keeping ahead of kohai in rank, so as not to lose face. When kohai does pass senpai in rank, kohai continues to treat senpai as his senpai, even though the rank has been changed. Commitment, dedication, they're a little bit different from the West to Japan, and responsibility for the dojo. But all of these things, the good points of the Japanese mentality in their training, I'm trying very hard to keep these in my dojos here in the US. And it's